I quite often see the question asked, how do you lubricate the Kel-Tec RFB? The simple answer is, like most any other modern firearm, you should use a high pressure lubricant in high pressure applications, grease, or you should use a low pressure lubricant, oil, in the low pressure lube points. For grease, I like this product marketed by Ventco called Shooter's Choice. It comes in this white syringe, which is one of its best features. It allows you to very precisely dispense it like a grease gun, and the long nozzle allows you to reach in and put it in places that are difficult to access. For oil, there are any number of fine products out there for lubricating your gun, so that's just pretty much a matter of personal preference. I'm using this product by Gunslick called Ultra Lube. It's just a light machine oil. So I also like to keep a toothpick around. Toothpick's real handy for cleaning. You can scrape out areas where crud's built up. It's handy for spreading out grease and oil without getting your fingers all gooey. So with those three items, let's go ahead and I'll show you how I lubricate my RFB. I'm going to use this as a pointer. Up in the front of the trigger group is the trigger pivot pin. There's also the safety pivot and the locking bar. Then there's the disconnector bar that runs down the left side of the lower. The sear assembly is directly below the safety pivot. The oil, you can put a drop of oil on the front of the safety and it will actually roll around the safety and drop into the sear area. The good thing about oil is that it migrates. The bad thing about oil is that it migrates. In this case, it's good because you can't actually see the bearing surfaces of, say, the pivot point of the trigger. But you can put a drop of oil on it, and that drop of oil is going to migrate into the bearing surface of the trigger pivot. Same with getting a drop to roll around down to the sear area or getting it to flow into the safety mechanism. The bad thing about oil migrating is that if you use too much of it, it's going to migrate out of the gun and onto your grip area and onto your hands and maybe onto your optic or anywhere else. So it really doesn't take a lot of oil. Only takes a little bit. Farther back in the action, you have the locking bar. The locking bar engages with the safety up here and prevents the hammer from going forward. So when you put the firearm on safe, that bar is prevented from traveling forward, which prevents the hammer from going forward. At the back of that bar, along either side of it, there are the hammer springs that pull on a cross rod. They also travel down these transfer bars that run on either side of the magazine well back to another crossbar that goes through the middle of the hammer. And that provides the pulling force to pull the hammer forward into the back of the firing pin. All of these pivot points are all easily accessed. It just takes a little bit of oil, just a tiny drop to those points is all that's required to keep things running smoothly. Here's where the toothpick comes in handy. Like down on the hammer, I can use it to squeegee the oil around and get it to the gaps where it will flow down and into the actual bearing surfaces where the pins pass through the hammer. In the back of the magazine well is the bolt stop. It slides in grooves in the back of the mag well. You can fairly easily put oil in there and let it flow in around and work it into place. You can also just barely see here, you can access the pivot point for the safety, or excuse me, for the magazine catch and the magazine catch itself to apply just a little bit of oil there. Again, does not take much to lubricate the pivot for the magazine catch and the magazine release. The only other place I lubricate on the lower is right on the face of the hammer. When the action cycles, the bolt gets pushed back over the top of this hammer rather violently. This is a fairly high pressure point to force the hammer back against the hammer springs and cock the hammer. So I like to put a little bit of grease there, and then I use the barrel of the nozzle of the syringe here to spread it out into a thin film. So that's about it for the lower. Next is the carrier. The carrier channel with the slide welded into the back of it has the recoil springs and their guide rods passing through it up to the tubes that are welded inside of the carrier that compress the springs when the carrier moves to the rear. I put oil at the front of the springs, a couple of drops on each one. Then I cycle it, work it a little bit to spread the oil out along the guide rods. That oil will migrate along those rods and keep the spring lubricated. I also put a little bit right at the back where the springs pass through the back of the carrier. New RFBs, when you first crunch on them, when you first pull on the handle, they crunch. Got kind of a crunchy sound, and I think it's the springs passing through here. So on the new RFB, that's a really good spot to lube. It'll quiet up the action, and it'll actually take a lot of the required force to cycle it out of the equation. From here, we move from the oil now to the grease. The slide assembly is most definitely a high pressure application, so we're going to apply a little bit of grease here. You can't really access the slide grooves in the carrier because the carrier channel actually comes up and kind of hides them. They're hidden down in here, and you just can't access them. You can access the bottoms of them, so I paint a little bit of grease onto the bottom edges. You can actually see on mine there's a little bit of wear pattern from the action cycling. So that is the best indication of where to put the grease. You can see the wear pattern, and that's where you apply grease. A key point up here, right at the front of the slide assembly, you can see the wear marks right here and right down here. These two here. That's where the slide rides up the back side of the extractors on the bolt, and that's what forces the extractors down over a newly chambered round. So we definitely want to make sure we get a little bit of grease on both of these. Now I'll use the toothpick again to spread the grease out. You don't want to leave globs anywhere. A film is what you're looking for. So just a light film painted onto the wear areas is really what you're looking for to help protect them. So that's it for the carrier. Let's move on to the bolt. I've removed the firing pin, so I can show you what I do with that. I've only ever used oil on the firing pin, just a little bit, just a drop. You can use the toothpick to spread it out. It will migrate around to the rest of the firing pin, just to have a light coating of oil on it to help protect it. The firing pin shouldn't have a lot of side loading applied to it. The hammer smacks it and it pretty much travels in a straight line. It might interact with the spring a little bit, and that's what the little bit of oil will help with the spring interaction. I put a drop in the back hole here, and I put the spring in, and I twist the spring a couple of times to spread out the oil onto the spring. Go ahead and push it on in there. Let me insert the firing pin through the spring and compress it, and then drop the retainer pin in place. Simple design, very easy to work on. I like that. No hand tools required. Farther forward on the bolt, you have the extractors. And we're going to put a little drop right at the extractor pivots. There's a clip that goes over and holds the two extractors together, and there's a pivot point where it meets the extractor, so we put a little drop there. Same for the other side, a little drop at the pivot and a little drop where the clip goes. I also like to put just a little bit on either side of the bolt right up front where the extractors slide. When a casing is in place, the extractors don't touch, the front of the extractors don't touch the side of the bolt. The rim of the casing forces them apart and actually frees them up to move freely. This is a good check to do when you're cleaning, to make sure your extractors are working properly, that they'll lift a fully loaded case up no problem. So, all right, that's it for oil on the bolt. Next, I like to use a little bit of grease in the hangers. There's a hanger here where the bolt engages a forward pin, and then there's another one here where the rear pin in the slide passes through the bolt. These receive a fair amount of force when the carrier and the action are cycling, so I like to put a thin film of grease in these areas. Here's where the nozzle really shines here, because I can put a dab of grease in there, and then I can use the round nozzle to squeegee it out into a thin film quite nicely and form a nice film all the way around the inside of it. This channel is really important because the rear pin rides in here, and the last bit of carrier travel after the bolt stops, after it's chambered around, the pin rides up this ramp, which forces the rear of the bolt down in front of the locking bar and actually locks the bolt closed. When the gun's fired, the carrier starts to the rear, pushed by the piston, and that rear pin hits this sloped portion, which raises the bolt up, releases the bolt above the locking bar, and then the whole thing gets carried to the rear. So this has quite a lot of force applied into it, so I just like a thin film of grease in there. The last place on the bolt I like to lubricate is the back of the back edge and the bottom. This, of course, is where it drops past the locking bar, but it's also where it rides over the hammer. So I like to put a little bit of grease there to protect that chrome on the bolt, and also protect the face of the hammer as this gets slammed back over the top of it during a shot. So we'll go ahead and install this back into the carrier real quick. Okay, that in there. All right, there we go. All right, the charging handle. The charging handle doesn't really have a lot of load applied to it, but it does develop some wear marks from interfacing with the bottom of the ejection chute. I think it leaves a couple little witness marks there, and on the edges where it's in the where it passes through the front holes in the carrier channel. So I'm actually going to put a little bit of grease on this, mainly because the grease doesn't migrate too bad, and it's not going to migrate out onto the charging handle on me too bad, and just to protect the metal that gets exposed there. And last, we have the barrel and receiver. I really like this part of the Kel-Tec design. This is one of the easiest rifles to clean, semi-automatic rifles to clean I've ever dealt with. Because the back of the chamber is exposed, you can get chamber brushes and a bore brush and everything in from the back. It's really easy to work on. You can get to it from the top and the bottom. You can get gunner's toothbrush in here to clean it real easily and get any dirt and debris out of here. This area doesn't get horribly dirty though, because the gas piston, the gas operating system is all the way at the front. It's not like an AR where an AR bolt usually comes out caked with crud. This bolt stays clean and shiny for the most part. It might develop a little bit of black carbon dust that's easily wiped off. So very easy rifle to clean. The only place it gets lubed back here is with grease, and that's the slide grooves here. Again, the slide and the receiver support the whole weight of the carrier channel assembly. So a fairly high pressure application that you want to make sure stays lubricated well. So I work some grease down into these grooves, and then I use a toothpick to spread that grease out along the whole length of the groove to give me that little film along the whole length of the slide groove. And I'll do the same thing over here. Alright, all the way up through the front, and all the way to the back, rather, of the groove. And the only other place I put lubricant is, it's very hard to see with this lighting, is the little spring detent right here that works with the adjuster vent. I put just a tiniest drop of oil on there to keep the spring detent working good and keep the adjuster working smoothly. I do not put any lube at all in the gas piston area. The reason being is that if you put any lube in there, you start shooting it, the carbon that comes back with the firing gases that work the piston are going to very quickly turn it to mud. Anybody who's shot an AR knows how dirty the bolt gets, because ARs like to be run wet, and all that carbon and crap just go right to the oil. Dry carbon will build up on the piston and inside the gas head, and you clean that out with a bore brush and solvent, but you make sure it's completely dry before you reassemble it. Let's see here. Other than lubricating some places just for corrosion, which might, just a patch dampened with a little bit of oil and just wiped over it, or a little dab on your finger and just wiped to put a thin film on areas you just want to protect. That don't necessarily they're not necessarily wear points. They just need, you want to put a bit of oil on them to preserve them. That's about it for lubrication of the RFB. So, thank you for watching.